Marcus Johnson was just trying to explain himself. Sitting in a cold metal chair, his hands slightly trembling, the 16-year-old faced the police officer across the table at the community center. What was supposed to be an evening of inspiration had turned into a nightmare. So you're telling me you were hanging around the building after hours because you were, what? Looking at the stars. Officer Daniels leaned back in his chair, skepticism etched across his face. I was using the roof access to test my homemade spectroscope, Marcus explained, his voice barely above a whisper. The astronomy club advisor gave me permission to use it, but I guess he forgot to tell security. The community center's security guard had found Marcus on the roof just after sunset. With no adult supervision and a strange-looking device in his hands, the guard had immediately called the police. Now Marcus was being questioned like a criminal instead of what he actually was, a passionate young scientist. Officer Daniels picked up the confiscated spectroscope from the table, a cardboard tube wrapped in electrical tape with prisms and lenses inside. To an untrained eye, it looked suspicious. To Marcus, it represented months of work and every dollar he'd saved from his weekend job stocking shelves at the local grocery store. And this thing does what exactly? It separates light into different wavelengths, Marcus explained, sitting up straighter. You can analyze the composition of stars by examining their spectral lines. I've been tracking changes in several variable stars for a science project. The officer's eyebrows raised. Then, unexpectedly, he started to laugh. NASA, huh? That's what this is about. Officer Daniels shook his head. Kid, I've heard some creative excuses, but this takes the cake. You know how many kids from this neighborhood have made it to NASA? 0. Marcus felt his face grow hot. He'd faced this reaction before, from classmates, from neighbors, even from some teachers. But hearing it from an authority figure hit differently. It stung in a way that made his chest tighten. I just want to study astrophysics, Marcus said quietly, his eyes fixed on his spectroscope. I know it's hard to get into NASA, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't try. Officer Daniels sighed, clearly unconvinced. Look, I appreciate ambition. But there's ambition and then there's fantasy. Kids from neighborhoods like yours need realistic goals. My brother works construction, makes good money. No student loans, no fancy degree required. Marcus nodded silently. He'd heard this speech before too. Well-meaning adults steering him toward what they considered practical paths. Paths that didn't include distant stars or rocket launches. I've called your mother, the officer continued. She's on her way. In the meantime, let's talk about trespassing charges and... The door to the small office opened, cutting the officer mid-sentence. A woman with curly hair pulled back in a ponytail stepped in, wearing jeans and a NASA windbreaker. She wasn't part of the police department. That much was obvious from the visitor badge clipped to her jacket. Sorry to interrupt, she said, her eyes immediately finding the spectroscope on the table. I'm Dr. Maya Patel. I was giving a talk at the science symposium next door when I overheard there was a situation involving a young astronomer. Officer Daniels stood up, clearly surprised by the interruption. This is an official police matter. I'm afraid you'll need to. That's a very impressive homemade spectroscope, Dr. Patel said, ignoring the officer and addressing Marcus directly. She picked it up, turning it carefully in her hands. Single slit or double slit diffraction. Marcus's eyes widened. Double slit. It gives better resolution for separating close spectral lines. Dr. Patel nodded approvingly. Smart choice. And what stars have you been observing? Mostly Algol and Delta Cephei, Marcus replied, his voice growing stronger. I've been tracking their brightness variations and trying to match them against spectral changes. Officer Daniels looked between them, confusion replacing his earlier condescension. Excuse me, but who exactly are you? Dr. Patel finally turned to acknowledge the officer. I'm an astrophysicist with NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. I specialize in variable star research, exactly what this young man is studying. She gestured to her windbreaker. Not just wearing this for fashion. The officer's expression froze somewhere between embarrassment and disbelief. The coincidence was almost too perfect, a NASA scientist specializing in the exact field Marcus was passionate about, walking in at the precise moment he was being told his dreams were unrealistic. "You work for NASA?" Officer Daniels asked slowly. 15 years next month, Dr. Patel replied. She turned back to Marcus. "Now, about this spectroscope. The craftsmanship is impressive, but have you considered adding a collimating lens to reduce light scatter?" Marcus's face lit up. "I wanted to, but I couldn't afford the right focal length. I've been saving up for one." While they discussed technical modifications, Officer Daniels awkwardly shuffled papers on his desk. The dynamic in the room had shifted dramatically. The person he'd been lecturing about unrealistic dreams was now engaged in a technical conversation with exactly the type of professional he'd claimed was out of reach. The door opened again, and this time Marcus's mother rushed in, worry etched across her face. She worked nights as a hospital aide and had clearly come straight from her shift. "Marcus, what happened? Are you okay?" She looked from her son to the officer to Dr. Patel, trying to make sense of the scene. Officer Daniels cleared his throat. "Mrs. Johnson, your son was found on the community center roof after hours. However," he hesitated. "It appears he was conducting an authorized science experiment that was simply miscommunicated to security." Dr. Patel stepped forward, extending her hand to Marcus's mother. "I'm Dr. Patel from NASA. Your son has built an impressive scientific instrument. His understanding of stellar spectroscopy is remarkable for someone his age." Mrs. Johnson's worry transformed into confusion, then pride. "NASA? You're with NASA?" She looked at Marcus, who nodded, a small smile forming. What happened next would change the course of Marcus's life. Dr. Patel explained that she was in town for a science education outreach program. She had been speaking at a symposium for educators at the convention center adjacent to the community center when she'd overheard security personnel discussing a teenager with a suspicious star-watching device. "Your son's spectroscope shows incredible ingenuity," Dr. Patel told Mrs. Johnson, "particularly considering the budget constraints. These are exactly the problem-solving skills we value at NASA." As the adults continued talking, Marcus sat silently, hardly daring to believe the turn of events. The officer who had laughed at his dreams minutes earlier was now awkwardly offering to help carry his equipment when they left. But the most surprising moment came when Dr. Patel handed Marcus her business card. "We have a high school internship program at Goddard," she said. "The application deadline is next month. I'd be very interested to see your submission, especially if it includes the variable star data you've been collecting." Marcus stared at the card in his hand. A real pathway to NASA, not just a distant dream anymore, but a tangible opportunity with an actual deadline and a real NASA scientist who knew his name. As they left the community center, Officer Daniels stopped Marcus briefly. "Hey, kid. About what I said earlier." He seemed to struggle with the words. "Sometimes people like me, we get used to seeing certain patterns. We forget to look up at the stars." He held out his hand. "Good luck with that internship." Marcus nodded and shook his hand, not trusting himself to speak. Outside in the parking lot, Dr. Patel spent a few more minutes discussing the internship details with Marcus and his mother. She explained that the program was competitive but emphasized that Marcus's hands-on experience and creativity would make him a strong candidate. "The astronomy club advisor mentioned you've been tutoring younger students too," Dr. Patel noted. Marcus nodded. "Just basic stuff, moon phases, constellations. We don't have a lot of equipment. Teaching others is one of the best ways to solidify your own understanding," Dr. Patel said. "NASA values communication skills as much as technical knowledge." As Dr. Patel walked toward her car, she turned back with one last thought. "You know, Marcus, every single person at NASA was told at some point that their dreams were too big. The difference is they kept looking up anyway." 6 weeks later, Marcus received an email that began with congratulations. The NASA Goddard Space Flight Center High School Internship Program had accepted him for the summer session. His project proposal, a comparative study of spectroscopic data from variable stars, had impressed the selection committee. When Marcus returned to the community center for the next astronomy club meeting, he brought his acceptance letter. The security guard who had reported him now